So yeah, that's I guess that's the main thing that we're trying to help is increasing liquidity. If you move on to the second slide, one of the suggestions that we thought of was that we could move to a UniV3 or a Curve-V2 kind of concentrated liquidity pool. There's kind of two issues with that. The first is that there's not any ohm liquidity on UDV3, which means that if people were purchasing without anything other than the ohm, they wouldn't get routed through the pool, which makes this kind of moot. And given that we're a partner with Olympus, we are not open to selling our Olympus and pairing with a different asset. So concentrated liquidity for the moment is not an option. In the future, if and when Olympus migrates to V3, we'd have an option there to really deepen our concentrated liquidity. So another thing, so one of there's kind of two main ideas about how we can improve our liquidity. The first one is that we can make our bonding of LP more cost and dilution efficient. And by that I mean when we bond ohm butterfly LP, we're essentially bonding 50% ohm and 50% butterfly. And because of the kind of 5-day staking yield and the 5-day vesting for bonds, we need to bond at a discount. So if we're onboarding, say, 100 butterfly worth of assets, we need to pay more than that. First of all, did an analysis of this, and in the past we had like a historical 7% discount, and so that means that if we're bonding 100% of assets which go into the treasury, we're paying 107 butterfly. And because we have the ability to mint butterfly, there's no reason that we should be paying the discount for the butterfly portion of the LP bond. And with that, if we mint butterfly, the butterfly portion of the LP bond, we would reduce kind of the overall cost of the bond by about 3.5%. And because there is no DAO fee associated with the minting of butterfly, it would reduce the emissions of butterfly for that bond by, I think, around 8%, 7%, 7.7%, I think. So it is more efficient from a cost perspective and a dilution perspective. So it's kind of like a no-brainer as to why we want to move towards this for now and in the long term going forward. So that's kind of the first piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle, if you look on slide 4, is that there is this shiny new debt facility in Olympus V2, and it allows whitelisted contracts to deposit SO and borrow ohm at a 0% interest rate. The 0% interest rate means that basically the loan will pay itself as rebases happen and the SO increases in number. And given that there's a 0% interest rate, and our collateral and our bond, our collateral and our borrowing tokens are the same in value, given that they're both SOM and ohm, there's no liquidation risk. So that's pretty neat. And with that, we can increase the capital efficiency of our SOM that we have right now. We have about, I think, 67,000 SOM worth about, I think, $13 million.
It's actually 69,000. It's gone up.
Nice.
Kind of like,
nice.
Yeah, I think the main point I want to make about like this own debt facility is like people are asking us a lot of questions like, are we going to get liquidated? It's not like that. It's more like alchemics. I just want to put that out there. Like effectively what we're doing is like we're using our yielding ohm, our SOM to borrow like regular ohm, which isn't yielding. And like basically Olympus is only allowing us to do one thing with that facility, which is to add LP. So there's no liquidation risk. It's basically like alchemics. Just thought I'd say that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the really beauty of it is that because we're borrowing ohm with SOM and they're both worth the same, the value of the loan, the value of the collateral move at the same pace, so we can't get liquidated. And so there are some terms to this kind of debt facility with Olympus. We've proposed a kind of 50% loan to value, which means that we would be able to deposit, say, 100 SOM and borrow 50 ohm. but there might be kind of a hard cap on the number of SOM we can deposit, although this may move dynamically over time. So with the kind of 69,000 SOM at the moment, we can immediately deposit that into the debt facility and take out a loan, which we can immediately pair with minted butterfly. And that's like a very good short-term solution to increase our LP. It's a nice little boost. I think by recent calculations, it's kind of like a few days worth of LP bonds, but with the dilution of a normal LP bond, because we're using existing OHM that we already have, so we don't have to kind of bond the OHM portion. So that's kind of the two pieces of the puzzle. And what that means together is that, first of all, we have this kind of initial period where we can use our existing SOM and boost our LP quickly. And then following that period, we can continue building the LP in a similar way that the kind of LP bond worked. So the way that this would work is kind of set out in slide 5. This would all be controlled by this contract called Thecosomata.sol. I think we'll have somebody talk about more of the specifics of that. But the contract would basically have some kind of parameters which would limit when we would be minting butterfly in terms of whether or not the debt facility has spare capacity, what our LP to market cap ratio is, and whether or not LP bonds are off. So I think I was mentioning earlier there's two periods. There's the first period where we're using our existing SOM, and there's a period after that where we'll be bonding OHM and then minting butterfly. So the kind of Thecosomata contract is kind of a long-term solution, and it allows us to reduce costs and dilution. I think it's worth noting that even though we're changing, how we'll be onboarding LP, we are not going to be, running turbo the staker dilution and the emissions. And the idea is that we would kind of have the similar sort of emissions that we have currently from the LP bond after we have used our existing SOM. And because of that, we would benefit from the kind of cost benefits and the dilution benefits from that. And we would continue to target, short-term LP to market cap so we can boost liquidity.
So I mean, like TLDR, like having Thecosomata enables us to kind of like grow LP a lot quicker to begin with. Then when we hit that debt ceiling, which kind of like Olympus has told us to kind of self-impose, they encourage the 50% LTV like self-imposed like upon like Thecosomata. So once we hit that, which means like once we kind of like turn 35,000 OHM into LP through the debt facility, we would then proceed to kind of using like new OHM that we kind of like get through bonds to essentially add LP, right? And so what this means is that like we'd be emitting butterfly to bonders at kind of the same rate, but we'd be able to kind of add LP at like twice the pace effectively. And it's kind of well costed out. The internal policy teams kind of calculate what all the parameters would be, and we're confident that it won't result in a huge amount of staker dilution or anything. Like it would be kind of similar to the existing LP bonds, except it'll be more capital efficient regarding like the use of like assets like that we have, like such as
Yeah, and one of the new devs that came to the team, everybody said hi to KP, came up with a diagram and stuff that he would post in the community call. Could give us a
Hey everybody. Okay. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Kieran. So since I can't stream, I'm gonna drop it in the community call channel. So yeah, one of the concerns that I guess the community had was security, and so we're doing a number of things to mitigate risk with the Thecosomata. So one of those things is being really tight with our contract permissions and moving assets on an as needed basis. So, for example, the Thecosomata contract will not have the ability to mint butterfly. Instead, we would actually be relying on an existing contract the staking distributor to mint those rewards and send it to the Thecosomata contract. And we also won't be moving all the SOM from the treasury directly to the Thecosomata contract. Instead, we'll be pooling the SOM every time we mint or every time we receive Butterfly, and pairing it with the Butterfly in small chunks to avoid, any, for example, the contract, sending all the SOM to some malicious actor that discovered an exploit. And other things we're doing are teams from other protocols will also be reviewing our implementation plans and our code. For example, the Yearn team and others, from what I know. And I think this is one example of how we'll be moving forward, I suppose, with our smart contracts, just keeping the architecture modular and simple, and making it easier for everyone to audit and just make sure everything's working correctly. I mean, the existing smart contracts have proven to be secure, so we don't want to, go adding any potential issues. We're going to be working around the existing stack. So yeah, hope that covers it.
Yeah, so essentially, like, the main point is, like, every epoch, Butterfly would be minted into the Thecosomata contract. So in the exact same time that, like, regular users have their rebases, Thecosomata would also receive Butterfly to add LP. And it keeps everything in sync. It also means that we can use, like, the same, like, mathematical logic that we have in the staking distributor to effectively decide, like, how much reward to give to Thecosomata to mint LP. So it's all, like, really consistent. We're trying to use it as many of the existing pieces of, like, the Ohm fork, which we're currently, like, basically in Ohm forks, we're currently trying to use as many pieces of, like, the Olympus protocol as possible to kind of reduce any unintended complexity or risk. The plan is, like, it's a really tight deadline on the engineering team, but we want to have something ready by Thursday or Friday so that we could get this, like, audited and reviewed during the same period that we're going to have this tabled in our snapshot. So kind of like the plan is that within Olympus, this is going to go to like their snapshot on Wednesday. And at the same time, like, this is currently in the request for feedback stage within our Commonwealth forum. And the plan is to kind of solidify this proposal in the next 1 or 2 days, kind of have, like, 2 official proposals in Commonwealth, one for the Constitution Amendment, because, like, technically right now we're not allowed to mint Butterfly for LP or this kind of purpose that we're doing it right now, and also for the actual Thecosomata as a whole, right? So there's going to be, like, 2 proposals in our Commonwealth. One is going to be a constitution amendment, so it will require, like, a larger quorum. It will require a 2/3 majority and a 5% quorum, as opposed to, like, the lower amount, which I believe is a 3% quorum and just a 50% majority. So, like, the idea is that we would have those within our snapshot on our Commonwealth by, like, Wednesday, and that would be put on snapshot for, like, Friday. And that means that it would have a 3-day period, and this should hopefully pass by next Monday. And we're doing the smart contracts in sync with that timeline. So hopefully we should be able to start implementing this next week. And yeah, so by, like, next Friday, like, we should probably have made our way through the initial, like, 35,000 Ohm that we're allowed to mint. So that means, like, a lot of the volatility that we're having right now, it should be kind of mitigated by, like, the fact that we're increasing the LP, as well as this, like, this also means that we can start to think about, like, what kind of new bonds we can add. Like, there's a lot of bonds, like as well as Ohm bonds, there's FSX bonds. I think someone in the community made a proposal for DopeX bonds, so we're trying to get those on Arbitrum as well, like, potentially. So, like, we need more liquidity to do this. So basically, like, we get this out of the way and we can do all the fun stuff for the rest of Q1, like late January, February. Like, we can do tons of stuff. That's basically, like, the game plan. I think we'll have some time for like some community questions. So like I see some hands, people want to get on stage. We can invite these people on stage.
You can ask the questions in the community call channel.
Yeah, as well. So like we can do both of those. We'll take questions from the community call, and actually if someone could kind of through that and curate, that would also be quite good. Do you guys want to get on stage to speak? So I don't mind laying them on.
We should just look through the community call channel and we can all curate questions and bring it up. It's been a bit more efficient.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Let's do that.
There's one question from J. Pooty Dingle who's asking about the about tokamak, our tokamak calls tomorrow. So yeah.
I mean, regarding the tokamak calls, I think like Sammy's here. So if Sammy wants to go on stage and talk about like Vodamark and like the acquisition, I reckon he's the best guy to talk to because like it was basically his plan. I don't want to like mince his words because like he's here and he can answer this question better than I can. So that's like if he wants to go on stage, like we can bring him up.
But there's a full-fledged Vodamark tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yo. You guys hear me?
You can hear me.
Yo, this is what I was saying. But don't invite people on the stage. Just talk about price and shit. Anyways, yeah. So is everything covered on like the OMLP side of things? And like, I mean, there's still questions and stuff in the community call.
I mean, yeah, like we're gonna go through and like we're gonna see like what kind of questions like are notable regarding like the Thecosomata and like OMLP. But yeah, like someone did ask a question about like the Vodamark acquisition. I thought, like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
you'll
I
be-
mean, like I'll talk about it briefly now since like I mean we're already at 5, but I'll talk about it briefly now. We're gonna try and get Wiz on for tomorrow, but like it's a bit like last. I mean, this dude just never responds. So, we'll find a time to bring Wiz on and we'll have like a long detailed chat about it. But yeah, I mean, like for those who probably can't make it, then because it'll probably be like one of those last minute calls. Yeah, we acquired Vodimac on Friday, was it? Um, and we think it's like a pretty strategic move for us, right? So as you guys know, there's a modular setup, you could say, to how bribes work, I guess, like in DeFi, right? When Redacted came out, it sort of extracted away from what you would consider the bribe mechanics in DeFi, like Vodium, etc., and sort of created this layer where we're profiting off of that, right? And we're sort of leveraging the concept of PCV to get the most out of bribes in DeFi because we find it to be an emerging, trend in DeFi. This is why everyone is here in this project. We all believe in that. Now, Vodium is making a killing. Vodium charges a 5% fee on all the bribes that go through there. And if anyone's familiar with like the bribes that go through Convex, it's a lot, right? With Vodimac, obviously I think all of us, like since the beginning of this project, like since like day one, everyone has been saying like we got to do something with Tokimac. And I think while we obviously will do Toke bonds eventually, but like while that is getting set up, we want to be involved with this next core event. This next core event, like there's like Terra has like a governance proposal to just put $2 million themselves, right? It'll be quite crazy. So we acquired Vodimac, and like you think like being at the forefront and sort of making this vertical acquisition, you could say, being there on both sides of the supply chain for how these bribes work is like, it's great, right? Because now what we can do is even if we're not the ones, even when we do get the Toki, we will be getting the bonds, we will be getting the bribes off of it. But now, even until like the Toki bonds are set up, even if like whatever the case is, like if anyone wants to bribe someone on Tokamak, we're sort of at the forefront there. We'll help facilitate it in collaboration with Tokimak, right? This isn't really like a hostile takeover or anything. It's like something we're doing in collaboration with Tokimak to help make sure that like these Toke wars succeed, right? So there will be like Vodium a 5% fee on all the bribes that go through this platform. The current plan right now is to put 2.5% to the treasury to help increase the backing, and then the other 2.5% just distributed to you guys who are like staking and shit, right? which is like pretty dope, I have to say. Not to like shell it and not to like boast my acquisition skills, but I think it's like really dope move for everyone in the community. I think this just makes sense, right? And VotiMac doesn't just end at Tokimac, right? Like eventually, as you guys all know, there's this trend of vote escrow tokens continues, right? This is going to be the big thing in DeFi for 2022, and we know, like, as a core team, like, while we're facilitating stuff, like other big projects that are setting up like vote escrow tokens, bribes, all that sort of stuff to sort of, I guess you could say, imitate Curve and how successful they've been with it. There's nothing stopping us from extending VotiMac beyond Tokimac and like getting involved with the bribes and being that bribe facilitator for everyone. Last thing I'll add, VotiMac is a tokenless platform. It's an infrastructure tool. So the revenue that's generated by VotiMac, like I said, is distributed back to the stakers in the treasury. It'll be governed by the Butterfly token, like Redacted is, and I guess yeah, like we'll probably elect like a committee within the community before the next core event happens to like take over it, and sort of lead the operations, make it more of like a community event thing than something we just did. Obviously, like the old core team from it, DCF God, Tomoyo, all these sort of guys that were involved, and like Wiz now, obviously, we'll be getting help from like them and like the Tokimac guys and everything. It'll be like a really cool initiative, and I think we can make it like a super dope platform. So if you can't make the call with Wiz, like that's sort of like the TLDR on VotiMac and what happened there.
Fucking lit.
I gotta bounce another call. But
All right, take care.
yeah, it's nice chatting with all you guys.
I think like before community call got taken over with copypasters, there was one decent question about LP, which is like, well, both sides of the pair, like the butterfly own pair that we're kind of stuck with right now, are kind of like effectively going to zero, at least in this current stage, because of the APYs, which is like a really relevant point. Like kind of like on our side, the way that we're alleviating that is literally using this like debt facility from Olympus, right? Because what we're doing is that like, okay, like we're getting ridiculous yield, so let's use it to like borrow back Olympus to add LP. And then in the future, we'll be able to take that and add more LP because we'd have like excess capacity in that debt position. Also, we'll be able to like take that like excess SOM that we have and like withdraw that and put it into another strat. So potentially we could be putting that into like a geom, like staking like geom or like Tokamak. So like, there's a lot of stuff that we can kind of like do with like this facility and like the excess that we have. And the kind of that's the best way that we're dealing with like the kind of yield. Like with Butterfly, like it's not our intention long term to have the yield be this high. For V2, we really want to cut back the issuance of new Butterfly and kind of focus on like alternate ways of adding value to the ecosystem and returning revenue from the protocol back to token holders. So I think like a way like time we kind of explained that was like, well, like Votermark, like kind of like the commission that we make on like Votermark as a service provider, like we would be giving that back to the end users. We're experimenting with kind of like new ways of doing that. Don't want to leak too much right now because I'll just be leaking alpha everywhere. But essentially, yeah, like for Butterfly, like we want to really ramp down this APY and focus on like more tangible rewards for the community. But yeah, like we're making the best use of the Olympus that we have to kind of maximize the liquidity and reduce volatility.
Do we want to get Json up here?
That would be lovely. Yeah, let's have him.
Let's go. Let's go.
LFG.
Go.
Hi, friends. I'm just bopping around from community call to community calls because today's market has been absolutely wonderful and beautiful. So hopefully some people got some entry-level positions into Redacted. But I guess I can represent Olympus in some questions if people have it. I missed the hi everyone. I missed the community call with Zeus earlier that kind of talked about the treasury and all that stuff, but I think people are sort of kind of misunderstanding the like what Redacted's vision and focus is in comparison to other, like, let's say forks, right? But like forks is like a broad term. And it's mostly because people compare it to the Olympus mechanics, but people are constantly innovating upon this. So like, you know, Sammy and I have had long conversations about his different views on it and how he can change it and kind of like use it in a unique way that can bring value to Redacted, but also bring value to the holders and what Redacted is ultimately going to do and kind of be within the ecosystem. And like, honestly, I needed to get into Redacted sooner rather than later. I kind of shot myself in the foot by missing the auction or whatever. And so I've like always just been watching the Redacted price literally every single day since. And Magnus, I asked Magnus to like ping me whenever it's low because sometimes I'm so busy with Olympus. So he like pinged me one time when I was at 1800 or whatever. But like long term, like Redacted is there's just like an insane amount of potential, and we're working so closely together with Redacted. And I say we as in Olympus. And you know the power that ultimately the power that one butterfly is going to have is going to be immense, right? Like if you look at Sam, he owns I think like 2.5 million convex. The way that I view Redacted in the long run is that Redacted is basically like the cartel is basically going to be the largest holders of the most significant and powerful governance tokens in all of DeFi, which is really important, and people need to kind of understand the significance of them. It's not really the price of Butterfly that you should really care. It's more so about like the value that and the power that Redacted in each Butterfly will eventually own, because it's going to eventually get to the point where it's going to become very, very, very concentrated. Right now, the APY is very high to influence people to provide to the treasury, provide liquidity, provide these tokens, bootstrap this treasury, this fucking monster, which is already a monster, right? And then sort of carry that through. And they have like a great team. And I know some of these guys up here and we work with them. And so, you know, the key thing about these governance tokens is that you essentially you have to make the first assumption in DeFi that everyone operates on greed, right? Which is an interesting article that Carson from Tokamak really originally released, where he kind of designed Tokamak around this. And like, that's a very interesting perspective. And so like, if you can think about that through the concept of Butterfly, right? Everyone sort of relies and kind of operates on the first principle of greed. And so with Convex and Curve, for example, the ecosystem, the way it's set up is such that if you have a lot of governance, you can essentially vote for specific gauges that reward people more. And if you have a higher rewards, these deeper pockets or entities are going to basically deposit into those gauges, right? And if they deposit into those gauges, you can think of like, oh, now there's more liquidity, it's a more capital efficient, you can capture more fees. So if you imagine that, you know, you're essentially controlling liquidity within DeFi, right? And that's just like just Curve and Convex. And then you literally control liquidity direction with Tokamak. And then on top of that, you have the DopeX. Now they have Votomac. And like, you know, Sammy and I have been sort of having discussions around stablecoin development. So basically people can borrow against their Butterfly at 0% interest and kind of go play in DeFi or do whatever they want to do, right? And then, you know, on top of that, we've been talking about like, how can we transfer more power to the token itself, right? Because Redacted is growing this monster treasury, but at the end of the day, we want people to feel that power through holding Butterfly, through having that, you know, having the Butterfly. It's the same thing if you own Convex, you know, $1 for Convex controls, I don't know, $15 of liquidity. You know, the ultimate goal will be that, you know, one Butterfly, if you hold one Butterfly, you control X amount of tokens or X amount of liquidity, and you have this like insanely valuable asset. And Olympus's ultimate goal is to be a flat currency, right? Like that's literally the goal of in the long run. And so if Olympus's goal is stability and backing and stable coins, Redacted being the governance power of it, because Olympus cannot focus all of its sort of bond capacity on these governance tokens. It just doesn't make sense, right? So that's why Lobus and Redacted kind of came to fruition, but Redacted more so is like more so intertwined, and it's been like a fantastic relationship working with these guys to really ensure success for both protocols, right? But the the sheer, like, if people looked at Redacted's treasury and just kind of realized what's coming, it's like the other tokens that I would ever hold in a bear market are the exact ones that Redacted holds. And like every single time there's a new partnership launched, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm trying to get more Redacted. And every time you guys announce something new, I want to buy more. But I don't have like fresh powder or whatever. But if you think long term, to circle back, right? Like Redacted will be the number one holder of Convex, basically. Redacted will be the number one holder of maybe YFV or DopeX or Toke or whatever. You like the value and power within one butterfly will just be absolutely insane. But the key thing is like, and the team already knows this, right? With the V2 kind of thoughts and the discussions around policies to really make sure that like, you know, us at Ohm or Olympus are making the right decisions in terms of creating a safe asset, this flat coin that's going to unpeg us and really make DeFi truly decentralized, which is important, right? We need to unpeg this global economy that's growing from the traditional like centralized economy. It needs to happen, and Olympus is that sort of key that needs to happen. And so because the cartel is so closely related to it, we can grow together, right? Such that like even if Olympus gets to a point where we're farming Curve or Convex, I'm literally going to throw up a proposal this week after it gets reviewed by some of the team to basically take some of our farmed assets and then just fucking bond it right into Butterfly. Like we want Redacted to just get as much power as possible, and we want to be a huge holder of Butterfly. And that means if Olympus is a huge holder of Butterfly, we're never going to sell Butterfly. Like we will never sell it, which creates a price floor, which creates stability within it, right? And then other people are going to start playing with Butterfly, maybe bonding Butterfly. And then when people can borrow against their Butterfly, it reduces selling. That way you guys can go and play in DeFi or do whatever you want to do without ever having to like leave this really valuable asset. And then through the ultimate governance transference to the token, that's like the ultimate like trifecta, if you will, of value to Butterfly in the long run. So much cool shit coming down the pipeline. Right now, things are rocky, right? Because there's high volatility. The market's kind of shit right now. But if you hold Butterfly and just really realize what they're doing in the long run, it is insanely valuable. Not only for Olympus, I'm not shilling it just because that, like I have a position in Butterfly, not as much as Ohm, but I wish I had more. But the idea is like, you have to realize one, like each of the tokens that, if you're bullish on all the tokens that Butterfly is holding in the treasury, you're mega bullish on Butterfly. You basically have like an index exposure, like which will be the largest treasury of these tokens anywhere in the world. So it is just, I don't know. I just came up here just because community call and like I love Butterfly and I love what you guys do, and I'm super fucking bullish on it, and I've always been bullish on it, and I'm like really excited to continue to work with you guys in terms of Olympus. But you know, think of like one of the guys came up here in terms of stables and Ohm. Like think of Ohm as like Olympus's focus is that to create that stability and bring that stability to Butterfly. And we're focusing in that direction. Think of it as more of a partnership, whereas Redacted's trying to gain that huge, massive control, right? So it's like, it is the two of us working together to really like basically create this just monster of like the largest presence, the most powerful presence within DeFi. Not so much so that it's like, we're going to, you know, I mean, you'll make a lot of money if you stick around. You just literally have to stake in 3-3 and chill, and then just basically know that like the teams that are behind these protocols are working literally 24/7 to make sure that to ensure its success and the longevity, right? And we're just getting started. Like, you know, Redacted's really young. Ohm is, you know, Olympus is young, but like people see the value in it. We're not going anywhere. You know what I mean?
Yo, Jason,
Beautiful.
since you're
That was
here,
really
like we had a talk, like I don't remember when, like a few days ago, about you know, since we were just talking about like voting Mac and all this sort of things now, what it would look like to combine like the voting power between like Olympus and Redacted and sort of just become that, like, you know, the de facto, I guess you could say, like dictators of governance and DeFi almost, right?
Right.
Maybe we want to like tell a little bit, like just so we don't keep like our conversations in the dark, like some of the ideas we were talking about and what that could potentially look like, specifically like the CVX, you know, making like a DAO to DAO fund of like the CVX.
Yeah. So basically, you know, one of the things that we're trying to like I said, like kind of touched a little bit before, Sammy and I are trying to like noodle about, and like we know that there's value within DeFi when an asset has governance control. So for example, like CVX, or for example FXS, right? Like FXS you can lock for 4 years. And like, there's always the saying that locking is for protocols, but like the values for the day traders, right? So, like you don't have to lock FXS or CVX or what have you. Olympus and Redacted will do that. I mean, Redacted will have an insane amount, right? But the idea is that so it's kind of like on Lobus's like front end, it's a similar concept to that, which is what we want to eventually get to, where like 1 ohm equals some basket of governance tokens and 1 butterfly equals some basket of governance tokens. Like, imagine, I don't know, like 50 CVX and, 11 toke or whatever the case might be. The idea that we want to do is we want to bring about these sort of like geom butterfly wars essentially. And we're trying to basically figure out a way that like, one, we can transfer some of that power of the treasury, these biggest, like Olympus and Redacted are going to have, like Olympus is going to have like the biggest, most like diverse, stable, also like, safer risk adjusted treasuries in all of DeFi. And whereas Butterfly is basically going to have literally the like biggest, most powerful from a governance perspective treasury from DeFi. Not to mention the network effect and like all the people that we have conversations with in terms of like how can we stick Butterfly and Ohm into these various different ecosystems. But the idea that we were kind of poking about was like, okay, how can we transfer this? There's a number of different ways that we can transfer this, right? We could say, oh, well, let's suppose somebody goes through Incubator or they want to go through some of these protocols. Then what people can do is like, we can democratize the power and say like, oh, here's these protocols that want to leverage like Butterfly and Olympus to like start up and do whatever and toke or what have you. We can essentially transfer some of that power and like give it to the community, right? Like through on-chain governance, where we say, oh, like, what do you guys think? Which protocol should be, given some of this power? So that's 1% of a potential opportunity of the treasury. The other potential of the treasury is that we can say, all right, if we find these like positive extractable value to both Butterfly and Olympus, and we just say, here's the gauges that you guys can vote on, think like FXS, right? Like if you go into FXS and you go into staking and you go into voting, you can use your VFXS to like go and vote to increase the rewards of a specific gauge, or think Vodium, or think Votomac, right? Like what Sammy was kind of touching on. It's the same concept, but with Ohm and Butterfly, right? And the idea is that, again, you are essentially like transferring, like we've basically accumulated these huge treasuries. But the problem is, it's like, okay, great. Like Butterfly and Ohm have like this massive amount of protocol controlled value. What does that do for us, right? Like, what does that mean for like, if I hold Ohm, what can I do with that, right? Because at a certain point, APY is not going to matter. It's going to be the power that each token matters, or the utility of each token. Ohm is essentially going to be this reserve currency that can be used, it's going to be ubiquitous without DeFi or throughout DeFi. And we want Butterfly in the long term to basically represent this like huge power of governance. And so we need to be able to transfer that treasury also to the token holder. And so we want them to go to a platform and vote and basically use their tokens to like influence different rewards and gauges, and people then can go farm for them. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Do you remember like kind of like the other things we talked about, Sammy?
Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that was brought up when Olympus started bonding CVX, right, before we came out, was there was talks about this like OUSD, or like Olympus launching like a stable coin or something, right?
Yeah.
And it's come up quite a lot like in our chats, because obviously we're kind of like, we're much more exposed to convex, I guess you could say, than you guys are. And obviously like with our relationship and stuff, like I think it'd be good to give some insight on what like a Olympus backed stable coin would sort of look like to like the Redacted ecosystem.
Yeah. So what we want to do, so there's a number of different stable coins that are kind of launching in terms of like through Olympus. We have Volt. There's also Vesta, but Vesta has like a basket of assets that, including like they have wrapped BTC and a few other sort of like more centralized assets that we don't really care for. But there's one in particular in terms of OUSD where essentially like people will go to this protocol and then they can deposit their like geom, and they can deposit their wrapped staked butterfly, and they can deposit their also wrapped staked lobus as well. But the idea is that like eventually that will create OUSD, and people can essentially borrow against their redacted or their butterfly, their and their lobi for 0% interest. And so like that's like the most bull case, right? Like if you truly believe in a product and you just have a bunch of it, you can literally, and you can borrow against 0%. Like why would you ever sell it, right? What's the point at that point? Like you're never going to incur debt. And so it just creates this massive holding, this like reduction in sell pressure essentially. And the idea is that when they're on this platform, they can then take that governance from those tokens and then vote for specific gauges in these different ecosystems. And then the idea is we then would take that stablecoin and then bond that and create basically LP pairs into various different systems. Like we have a very super close partnership with Sam from Frax. And so we're essentially going to we're combining the concepts of liquidity, Frax with like an AMO, and Abracadabra in like one specific protocol that is centered around the Olympus ecosystem as well as the butterfly ecosystem to maximize treasury growth essentially. And then we can play around with it in a number of different ways. Like you could do like butterfly gauges and various different things. It just opens up this huge door because we now have this stable coin. And that stable coin is our stable coin. And then that can also bring value not only to Redacted, but also Olympus, right? And we've been just kind of like noodling about like how this would look or what would it look like in the long run, right? So I think, IRC's also been working closely with you guys to kind of determine a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think like a lot of people that are maybe like new to Redacted weren't around in like the early days when we were. Yeah, I think one thing we have to do is like increase like user education. Obviously, I guess like every protocol does, but I think when people think about like forks, they think about like reserve currency on X chain or something, right? Something that's supposed to eventually be able, right? Like a currency. It's not a right, like what do they call it? Like right pill take, whatever. That to say that like Redacted, like Butterfly is not a reserve currency whatsoever, right? This is not we are leveraging the concept of like protocol controlled value through the Olympus mechanics to sort of accumulate this governance power. And we are not seeking to make Butterfly a currency per se, right? Obviously with that comes more volatility, right? But I think that's why I bring up the concept of stable coins, right? Because I think if we can create this sort of balance in our ecosystem, at least where we have a stable alternative, like a stable as in pegged alternative to get exposure to like the Redacted ecosystem, it could be really good, right? Because obviously like today is like a weird day to talk about it because there was just a whole bunch of shit that went down. But as you guys see in general, like even as we started to build out the liquidity through the topic that Kieran was talking about, some stuff we're doing with Frax, whatever. Redacted is not backed by stable coins, right? Redacted is backed by governance power. So I think it would be really cool, like, as we sort of grow and create a larger treasury, with a larger treasury comes larger swings. We create this like stable alternative so that for people who want to like buy into the Redacted vision can sort of like access it through a stable coin, right? And I think that's like one of the benefits we got by like working with Olympus on all of this, right? Is that we can sort of tap into all the awesome things that they're doing and leverage it for our ecosystem too.
Right, exactly. And then like in the long run, right? Like right now there's a lot of volatility for but you have to think about long term in terms of like 3 to 5 years, because that's really what we're thinking about, right? Eventually is going to be a flat currency, and Redacted will essentially be inextricably, I'm saying that wrong, but like basically literally tied to it, and they'll have massive exposure to it early on. So if becomes this like the ultimate safe currency that unpegs DeFi from all of centralized finance, Butterfly and Redacted, the cartel, is basically perfectly positioned in such a way that they will have like massive exposure and just have the greatest amount of stability within their treasury. Because the reality is that like the majority of stablecoins like USDT and USDC are pegged, right? And they're pegged to centralized entities, and that's not good, right? It's not ideal. So with Olympus, our focus is really trying to acquire as much risk-free value as possible, as meaningful as possible, in such a way that like it's decentralized, they're over collateralized, and the chances of them losing their peg is very, very tiny. And we take it very, very seriously, right? So, there's always speculation. There's always even Zeus said, looking back in like 2021 and kind of moving forward in 2022, like there's always still a chance that like things could go in the reverse order. But the reality is that like and Olympus, along with Redacted, have so much momentum now. There's so much energy in the system now that it is like both ecosystems and both sort of protocols are perfectly positioned to basically bring as much value back to the token holders as possible. And it's always about 3-3ing together, right? Like it's always about growing together. It's much easier to basically collaborate rather than have a zero-sum game. And that's what Butterfly and Olympus are constantly trying to do, is like, okay, how can we work to make this as mutually beneficial as possible? Or how can we work to make sure that this adds value to both protocols and both token holders? And I think that's one of the best parts about working with you guys and Sammy in particular, even from the early days, Sammy, like when we were, when you were kind of like pitching the idea or whatever, it was always like, how can I help Olympus? And like, how can it also help Butterfly, right? It's always this like dual way of that we were thinking about it. And I think, through more of these like assets and as Olympus has more partnerships and integrations and things like that, it'll just open up more and more doors for Butterfly holders, as well as like the Olympus, the future Olympus economy, and then ultimately the value that can just be extracted, right? And then the value back to the token holders. So it's like, it's the perfect combo in a lot of ways. Like I always just feel happy that I see this like newspaper butterfly and like an Olympus Omega symbol on my Zapper or whatever. But like I'm just always bullish on the future of these protocols, and like we're just getting started. It's people. I think people forget about time domains in terms of in crypto, but like we're building for the long run. So it's just really more of like a so you just got to kind of like sit back and relax, right? Like everything's basically getting figured out, and like we were going to make sure that we maximize the value back to you guys and the ecosystems that's about to sort of unfold, right? But the idea is that, I'm rambling here a bit, but the idea is that like if Olympus achieves its vision, right, it's going to be fucking huge. Like it's going to be the reserve currency, the economy of DeFi. It's not like, oh, we're going to be the most powerful, like we're going to make money, power, everyone's going to have to come to us. Like Olympus is an open door, right? If you like collaborate with us, then like the positive sum game is that much more better, rather than being like, oh, I'm going to create another reserve currency and like fuck Olympus, right?
It's on
So
Solana,
though.
It's a reserve currency, but it's on Solana.
Yeah, or something, right? Like it's a different reserve currency wherever. Like we literally have like a friendly fork section in one of our partnerships, like servers or whatever, like where we try to like, they hold some of our token and then, we maybe hold some of theirs depending on their treasury, right? But the relationship between the cartel and like the Olympus is so tight and so intertwined that like the opportunities are just immense, right? You have like something that has an insane amount of risk-free value that's going to forever be growing, that has more risk-averse policy management, versus like a treasury that's just like, you guys are going to own all the spice. Like even when I talk to some of the smartest people that I know, the tokens that Redacted hold are how do I say this? Like they're critical for DeFi to operate. DeFi is not going to die, even if we go into a bear market, and the tokens that Redacted have are going to retain value because they're crucial, right? They're crucial for value extraction, they're crucial for operation, they're crucial for governance. And the same thing goes for Olympus. Olympus is positioning itself such that it's like, it doesn't matter even if regulation knocks on the door of some cryptocurrencies, Olympus's treasury is completely shielded from that. And so that, like what that happens for Butterfly is like, Butterfly essentially gets that index of other values, right? The same thought process where you purchase Butterfly and one Butterfly equals a basket of assets. Redacted holding Ohm is the same concept as like, oh, Ohm is this basket of assets that contain massive risk-free value, and there's stability within that, right? So it's like, it's really hard to like show people the long run, but there are some people that see it, right? And that's why people need to stop thinking about short-term price action and think about what they hold and what it's going to be eventually.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, like I encourage all you guys to be like cautious with where you put your money and stuff like that. I think it's really important, like with all the noise that happens in DeFi. But yeah, I think just to like add on to Jason's point, like, you know, it would be a lie for me to say like there's gonna be like what happened today, like that's gonna be the only time it happens, you know, like this is gonna be a journey. Like obviously we're all gonna be like in it together. Like there's gonna be ups, there's gonna be downs, and you know, everything we're doing as a team, everything we're doing as a DAO, like, you know, just looking at like all the people we have on stage here, like when this project started, like it was like maybe like 2 people on the stage, it was just us, right? And like the community is growing like crazy, it's growing really sustainably. I like how we have no like moon boys in here, rotators, all that sort of stuff. And like I like how we're all like focused on the end goal, right? It's a very ambitious goal, but I think like the trajectory we're heading and like the way we're executing on things, like we can get there, right? So that's like the only thing I'll add on to what Jason said. We're keeping everyone like way over. Like we were only supposed to talk about this like OMLP shit, and then we talked for like an hour about something.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I think that one point I want to add in is kind of like we're always thinking long term, right? Like we're always thinking long term, but it's kind of like in order to get there, when you think about the next week, the next month, the next 6 months, and it's kind of like everyone in the team is trying to balance like both of those, right? Like we're trying to become like actually the cartel, right? Like we have all the governance tokens, and you know if you want to get something done in DeFi, like it would be really good for you to have Butterfly, and we want to like have that future. At the same time, like we always kind of like work with like we want to have as many friends in DeFi as possible, and we kind of reach out to like all these various like protocols and try and build connections. And like we're not here for like short term, we're here long term. And like I don't know, I don't want people thinking that because we're kind of moving at this pace, like we're not thinking long term. It's just that it's kind of like you have to like balance like long term and short term, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to like grow quickly and healthily so that we can kind of blossom into like a long-term vision that we have. And that's what we're kind of doing with like designing our V2 protocol. Is we're thinking, well, like a lot of this stuff kind of being an own fork, there's kind of an expectation that we like worry about RFV and like runway, and these things are kind of like irrelevant to us. So we're trying to like blossom into something which is like more more kind of like suited to like what our long-term goals are. But at the same time, like the next week, the next month, these are so important, especially like considering how young the protocol is. So yeah.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't mean to derail this. I can stay up for a little bit until about 5, and then I got to hop into another DAO meeting. But I can stay up in case anyone has any questions in terms of like the Olympus Redacted relationship, and like we can just continue like.
No, you didn't derail it. It was absolutely beautiful. Like the way you explained things was amazing, and like I don't want people to like forget about the long-term vision, right? Like we have these proposals to kind of fix short-term problems, but like we're always about the long-term vision. And it's really cool that you came on stage.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate you guys even having me. Like again, Redacted is, like Sammy said, perfectly positioned for just having immense influence within DeFi. And this is where all the whales want, like all the tokens that Redacted have are all the ones that the whales hoard. And there's a reason for that, you know, and there's a very clear reason. And some people like don't understand that. They don't. It's the same reason where Tetra's like knocking on people's faces and being like, I told you to buy CVX at $2, or I told you to buy FXS at $4, whatever. And so like Redacted is perfectly positioned in such a way that like with the network and like the Olympus network and everything, like it's going to reach a point, and like pretty fucking soon, probably within like 1 to 2 years, where it's just going to be like unstoppable. And it really, like at that point, it's just like someone's going to have to fucking create a fork to consume Ohm and Butterfly or something. I don't know, but
Actually, like it's good that you bring that up. If anyone here, okay, whatever. I mean, if anyone, we'll make an announcement or whatever. But our friends over on Polygon Vist Finance is now bonding Butterfly. If you want to like bond Butterfly for Vist, and also DAO of Diamonds on mainnet is also bonding Butterfly. So I had to, like, we were supposed to announce that today, but we didn't. So this is the announcement.
Also concave.
Yeah, well, Like, yeah, concave too. Yeah, I guess.
Which is super bullish, right? Because if you have treasuries that are bonding, one, that creates immediate buy pressure because people need to have Butterfly in order to give it to the protocol. And then two, well, some people already have Butterfly and they'll do it, but some people have to buy it, so that causes buy pressure. And then two, most likely those protocols are not going to like sell that, right? Especially they're not going to sell like if OHM becomes a reserve currency, they're going to want to have it in their treasury. And then for Butterfly, like if they want to have governance power and not like have to use a bunch of bond capacity, because people have to realize like you can only allocate so much tokens per day to consume stuff to the treasury, right? You can't just like open up the floodgates and be like, yeah, let's fuck it, let's go. Like let's just raise the ROIs, let's go, lower the BCVs, let's get it cracking. You have to like watch it because you don't want to like nuke the fuck out of your token, right? So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, exactly. That's why we're thinking about this LP situation, because like the way that we want to be a black hole for governance tokens, it's usually holders rotating to accumulate Butterfly.
Right.
So we need to be able to absorb this self pressure.
Right. And I think like I started to read through it, but you guys did a super long proposal. But like I started to read through it, but the general idea is like it's really innovative, especially with some of the technology that's sort of come about. And like Olympus is the gold standard. Olympus never stops innovating. If Butterfly has it in their treasury and we're super closely tied, the innovation that's going to flow between the two is going to be like nothing DeFi's ever seen, literally, like quite literally. And it's only going to bring that much more benefit in the longevity for both protocols and the value back to the token holders. So it's just a good time to be an OHM holder or a Butterfly holder or both or whatever you see fit. But Butterfly, since we're on this stage.
Yeah. Especially like working on this Thecosomata build and like thinking about ways that we can kind of leverage our relationship with OHM. The one thing that I realized is that in terms of OHM being a reserve asset, it's not the backing and like the equilibrium in the future that's going to make it a stable reserve asset. It's actually like the innovation and like the products that Olympus is providing to like all the protocols it's aligned with. That's what really brings the value, right? Like for example, this treasury facility. Like these are products which like rival central banks, and they're actually a lot better than what central banks provide because they're composable, and like as a protocol we can plug into that, right? And that's what really like
Bro,
kind of
let's
like
wrap up, bro. We're just on here just chilling with that.
yeah, I know, I know, but yeah, like 100%, like that's what gives own value, and that's like why like we're really bullish on working with Olympus. Like, it's yeah,
Right.
it's that yeah.
Right. And then the cool thing is when there's like a tri loop or trifecta, like if like Olympus is like constantly talking, like I'm constantly in conversations with TZ, like from DopeX. And like if Olympus brings value to DopeX and Redacted consumes DopeX, well then the value per Butterfly increases. And then if the value per Butterfly increases, the value in OHM increases. And it becomes literally like the fucking elephant meme, right? So this is what happens when there's 3-3 together, and like that's what Sammy's kind of like pointing to, like, oh, like if there's more utility within, and then also real, where it's like if there's more utility for OHM, there's more utility to these partnerships, there's more value to these partnerships, probably the same partnerships that Butterfly has. That means there's more value to Butterfly, which means there's more value to OHM, and so on and so forth, right? And it's design, it's not well designed, it's kind of serendipitously evolving, but it's evolving in such a way that it makes it healthy for the long term, right? Because we're just seeing value in each other and we're never really trying to sell each other ever, right? So it's just valuable to like hang on and like deal with the volatility. And like people forget, like, one time OHM went from $1,400 to $100, right? And like the true diamond hands stuck around and they're rewarded, right? And that's why the high APY is at the beginning, to reward people to provide capital and to like weather the storm of volatility. And if they truly understand the long-term vision. And for Butterfly, in my mind, like if you know the long-term vision of Curve, like especially Curve V2, like people are fucking sleeping on Curve, whatever. So like Curve long-term, Toke long-term, DopeX long-term, YFI long-term, like all these other protocols, like you'll know what you hold is quite valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Should we wrap up here, guys, or you guys want to keep on talking about the OMLP bonds?
We're good.
I mean, I think we've answered all the main questions. Let me just check community call if there's any like good questions. I think it's quite late. Like for example, like never defines in like +1, so it's like I think it's like nearly midnight for him, and like yeah, like I think maybe we should kind of aim to end it in the next 5 minutes. Yeah, I can't really see any like interesting enough questions to answer in community call. I think we can wrap up.
Yeah, let's wrap up then. We'll just we'll be in general and stuff, I guess then, guys. Thanks for joining. All that other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the vote, like so in Olympus forum, like OIP69 goes live on Snapshot Wednesday. On our end, we're gonna like solidify the request for feedback into two actual proposals. We're gonna kind of do that in the next 1 or 2 days, and our stuff will go on our Snapshot probably Friday. So like yeah, like we're looking forward to the votes.
Thanks for having me up here, guys.
Peace out, guys.
All right, take care, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
See ya.